Welcome back to the Outlap podcast. How are we doing, gentlemen? Much better race than Japan last weekend, eh?
I'm just gonna say it. I'm back after a little bit of a hiatus from being a busy dude, and the race was interesting, and now I have something to talk about.
It's good to
Just
good
come
to
from
have
good
you back,
ones.
my friend. Good to have you back. That was a great race. It was definitely the least stressful part of my weekend with Rory at the Masters. I sent my friends here a picture of my heart rate monitor when Rory missed that putt on 18, and it got up to 104, like me sitting on my couch.
That's
The
hilarious.
copious amounts of high noons probably didn't help with that, but safe to say, like I was chilling watching the race. I was just thinking about if Rory was going to blow it or not. So glad we had some good action on the track and on the golf course this weekend. But this is not a golf podcast.
No, but we got some golfers here and definitely got to tip our cap to Rory. Yeah, Trav. At the end of our last episode, I called it. I was like, if there's an over on 5 overtakes on the first lap, I'd take it. And I think it delivered like 7 or 8. So that was an easy cash in bet. And like it's nice that there are still those tracks that are really, really good for these Formula One cars to race in. But you notice that pretty much everywhere it's twice the width of Suzuka, damn near the whole way around, and that's why they're able to do a lot of those moves. But you know, tale of two weekends in a lot of ways. Obviously, with the track and the racing that happened, but let's just talk about it first because we sucked him off last time. Max Verstappen and Red Bull. Um, from an absolute dominant performance to just being nowhere, and really like no amount of Max Verstappen driving was going to make that car finish any higher.
Yeah, do you think when just looking back at the two races, right? Like, obviously he put together a phenomenal quality that got him into first place, held on to first, got into clean air the last race, and then this race obviously didn't put together the big lap, gets into dirty air, and he's in dirty air. How much do you think that is impacting like the Red Bull? Like we always knew that was a thing, right? Like back in the Lewis Hamilton days when Max was making a charge. Like anytime he got out in front, good. Anytime that he was like battling a car, good. Anytime he was like in a pack, problems. So I'm just thinking like, well, Max is still Max, and the car is still the car that won a race last week. How much of it is the dirty air, and how much of it is like the track, and how everyone else just adapted well to it?
Yeah, I think a
It's
lot's the
track.
track. I think a lot's the track. Like if you look at Suzuka effectively has like a half of a straight heading into 130R, where Bahrain has four straights, and I think it just kind of allows the track to show up a little bit more and allows those cars that are engineered for those kind of longer straights and power to really show off. Whereas Suzuka, like super tight, you got to be hooked up the entire time in every lap, and allows the driver to shine a little bit. So I thought Bahrain was really cool. I know Nick last time I said that I didn't remember the track. I totally do. It used to be the opening race of the year, right?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, definitely
Until
remember.
the last couple of years. Actually, I think
Yeah,
this year was the first time going back to Australia for the opener since
yeah,
COVID.
that's right. It's a really fun track. Love seeing the stuff under the lights early in the weekend. It's always cool under the lights, and yeah, it's a cool track. But I definitely think that the Red Bull just kind of got exposed because of the straights. It just does not have it on
Well,
straights.
I think it's the straights and the braking zones. If you notice, Max, a lot of his radio messages is complaining about the brakes, and there's a lot of really big braking zones in Bahrain. So I think in this, like in one sense, Japan was definitely playing to all of their strengths. So like fast, high speed corners, the car being able to be planted, but also not being bad on tire wear. This is a highly abrasive circuit with a lot of tire wear. So I think it was the combo of they're not that good on the brakes, and there's a lot of very heavy braking zones here, and they're not very good on the tires. And it was a two-stop race for everybody in the field. So it was definitely. I don't think it was. Dirty air related because you saw how many moves that were able to be made. And Max, even with this car, has charged through the field multiple times, especially when he had the best car. So definitely track related. I think it'll be interesting though. Like that kind of showed me where we kind of thought their pace actually was, being the third or fourth best car on the grid.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, definitely didn't seem like I think Mercedes was pretty impressive in a lot of the straights. I think Ferrari, I think firmly in third there, and then the Papaya is just quick, man. They're just quick. Uh, Going back, Trav, around remembering that track, like for any people that do any sim racing, I do very little of it, but I spent a lot of time trying to race that track in some way, shape, or form with Nick.
Can I
And I'll
guess
tell
why?
you that, like,
Because it's the very first race that you do in the F1 game, and you can't get past it because that's how I am
no,
too.
no. Actually, Nick just every time I show up to Nick's place, I literally am like, all right, dude, throw me into something, and he either puts me there or
Austria.
Austria.
Austria
And
is like one of the easiest tracks, is why I always try and start
yeah,
people at Austria.
exactly.
There's like four corners, and all you got to do is like figure out how to take a few at high speed, and it's not as hard.
Well, I'll tell you what though, that like the down, it's like a right hander, like sweeping left, hard left. Then you have that like long run, like it's a straight, then like a long run uphill. It's kind of like high speed turns from there. I lose it nonstop in that like really slow kind of left hander. And just watching those guys battle through that, or just around that,
The,
was
the
like,
turn where Sainz tried to dive bomb Antonelli, right?
yes,
That turn,
yes,
yeah,
yes.
yeah. So it's a really tough turn because it's an angled braking zone and it goes downhill, and so if you don't get the car slowed enough, you're just going to push wide. Or if you go in with a little bit too much speed, you're going to oversteer trying to get to the corner. So it definitely is a tough one. And yeah, so I think we should, and unless you guys have anything else you want to touch on, we can hop over to starting off with quali.
No, I just think even more than it being like wide and seeing a lot of overtakes down the DRS straights and stuff like that, like I think a lot of the heavy braking zones have a lot of opportunity for overtakes even when there's mistakes and allow for drivers to kind of play games defensively. And I think turn one is a great example of that, where you can really hit it hard on the inside of turn one and have the turn open up a little bit, even though you're going to be out of positions for turns 2 and 3. And you saw like a lot of really cool switchback moves there. It's a really fun track for F1 cars to drive on. Like maybe it's not the most exciting track overall, but for F1 cars, it's absolutely perfect.
Totally agree. Um, and because it's a better racing track, that and obviously there's a little bit less jeopardy. Quali isn't necessarily as exciting in terms of seeing these guys on the absolute limit, cutting it razor thin margins with walls and stuff like that. But I thought that the quali was still pretty exciting to watch. So, Q1, nothing really happened. The normal kind of players fell out. Albon being one of the call-outs that fell out in Q1, and my guy Lawson wasn't able to get out of Q1 either. Doohan actually was performing really well through the first two sessions of quali, almost made it into Q3. And then Sonoda was able to improve his qualifying performance, got it into Q3, as well as Sainz was able to finally, hook up somewhat of a lap with that Williams and got it into Q3 as well. Piastri ended up on pole. Lando wasn't able to put together his final lap, started in P6. And then Gasly was another call out from quali, had a really good performance, qualified in P5. So starting order was Piastri, Russell, Leclerc, Antonelli, Gasly, Norris, Verstappen, Sainz, Hamilton, and Sonoda. The one thing that I didn't call out is in Q2, pretty moderate crash in all things considered, especially some of the wrecks we've seen as of late for Esteban Ocon, but absolutely destroyed the car and actually ended up causing a red flag. Russell and Antonelli, so the Mercedes went out into the pit lane before the restart time was announced, and actually both of them got a one-place grid penalty. So though Russell qualified in P2, he started in P3. Antonelli qualified P4 and started P5, which pushed Leclerc and Gasly up to 3 and 4.
Yeah, I had someone ask me this the other day. They were asking about like as a rookie, right? We were talking about Antonelli and how he's honestly been killing it and just been pretty impressive as a rookie. And while a handful of the rookies are still kind of trying to like maybe get used to their butt in an F1 seat, they've been impressed with Antonelli. What would you guys say from an outsider's perspective? Like, what is the big difference that happens from a driver's transition from like F2 to F1? Obviously, the cars change, but like, is it like more like being able to like give feedback to the engineers? Like, what is it that makes a rookie succeed, with the exception of like you're on a better team, makes a rookie better in F1 if they're a stud in F2?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I like just putting all car stuff aside, like just all things that has to do with like being in a good car, and like even the upgrade of the cars from F2 to F1. I listened to an interview the other day with Ollie Behrman, and they were asking him like what the biggest difference is between F2 and F1 and what the promotions. And he said by far it's the amount of time that he has to spend doing media stuff. So I think just like isn't that like it's crazy to think about it, but like he said by far that was the biggest change. And like thinking about the kind of person that it takes to get in the F1 seat, like you're in F3, F2, like even if you're a stud, like you're relatively under the radar, and like these aren't like high dollar teams, right? They're kind of scraping by. Whereas you get into F1 and like, dude, the spotlight's on you, and like there's something to be said. I mean, thinking about like calling back to Rory at the Masters, like that dude is one of the best golfers to ever live, and it took him 11 years to win a Grand Slam with that pressure on him because he's getting asked about it all the time. And I bet like Kimi Antonelli seems like a really cool, level-headed dude. Ollie Behrman seems like a really cool, level-headed dude, and some of those other guys, like maybe not. And I think the car has a lot to do with it, but I don't think I would underestimate. This is a very sports radio take, but like I don't think I'd underestimate the amount of pressure that these guys are under to perform. And I think you kind of see that with that first weekend where Lawson spun, Hadjar spun, on the outlap. Like there's a lot of stuff going on that those guys didn't have to deal with in F2.
And on that same vein, and a little bit more in the driver's seat perspective, I think about capacity, right? So like some guys just have more innate pace. So like Antonelli being one of those guys that really has climbed up through the ranks and has, everyone's known that the dude has a crazy amount of pace. So that means mentally he doesn't have to use as much mental capacity to drive the car fast. That means he's able to give better feedback. He's able to make those adjustments while he's driving and be in a more optimal position overall. So like that's kind of the way I look at it, is just a capacity perspective. Whereas like Lawson driving that Red Bull, he clearly had to do every single thing he could just to drive it fast, right? And so that's where there's so many adjustments and so much additional feedback and people behind you that you get in F1 that you're making 10 changes between the diff, the brake bias, all kinds of different things throughout the lap. And if you're, like I said, like Lawson in the Red Bull, you're not going to be fed that same level of information to get your car in the optimal point for every turn, for every place, because they're like, all right, you're already at capacity, just trying to keep it on track. So that's kind of the way that I look at it, and what really makes these guys like take as a fish to water to a car. And obviously, to your point, it's hard to take the car out of it. But the Haas is clearly not a great car, and Ollie's a rookie and able to perform in it. So that's where I think it comes from, sitting in the driver's seat perspective. It's that mental capacity. How much time and how much energy do you have to spend on other things other than just driving the car fast? That's like the base level.
Got it. So if we if we refer it back to maybe something that we all could recognize, right? It's like it is the cognitive load of like in the early days when you're learning to drive a car, especially like a stick shift, and you're trying to like think through what gear do I need to be like pulling up to a light, and like then I'm like trying to change the radio state. Like that comes later as you get more comfortable with certain pieces of the puzzle. But like the cognitive load for these drivers of doing all the things that a driver can do to impact, it's not just driving, it's being able to balance it all.
And that's why I said in the same vein as Trav, because like the pressure that they're getting from the media and the 15 extra questions they got asked before they sat in the cockpit is also weighing on them as well. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
To call a spade too, F1 cars have 30 miles an hour more top speed and pull double the G's that F2 cars do. So like probably has a lot to do with that as well.
There's a physical and just aspect
that
to
makes sense. That makes sense. So I guess getting to the race, right? Speaking of guys who can drive their car and also think of everyone else's car, we get to the start, and Max immediately can see Lando's immediately screw up.
So what happened was is Lando actually lined up in his grid box, and what seems like as a part of their start procedure is they essentially half drop the clutch and get it to just almost the bite point. And so when he did that, he must have not had the brake depressed enough, and when it half engaged, he rolled forward out of his pit box. So it's like from Mac's perspective, it's kind of just peripheral vision. You have that something that's stationary, and you see it move forward, and you're like, he moved. So, and again, like I'll get to it later, but that wasn't the reason. Lando had a great start, all things
Yeah.
considered, other than rolling forward. That wasn't what got him the great start. But my guy needs to fucking step up. My guy needs to step up. But I'm wearing the papaya today because I need to be a man of my word, and I am still a McLaren fan. I'm not sad that Oscar won a race, right? And if Oscar ends up being the dude that clearly shows he's the number one this year, then like I'm gonna be behind Oscar as well. I'm gonna be sad that Lando, has withered in the face of the championship, and I hope that he's able to go lock in and kind of show us the opposite. But the thing that I keep thinking about is how much different this championship would look right now if Oscar didn't slide off into Australia. You know what I mean? It would be pretty cut and dry that Lando is the number two driver right now. So,
Last thing I'll say there before we really dive into the race. That is my hardest thing about being a fan of F1. It's like, do I fall in love with the team or the driver or what? Because in situations like this, we're like, again,
I'm not
started
going
my
to not
career.
support him. I'm a man of my word, though.
Yeah, listen. As a man who started his career as a Daniel Ricciardo fan at Red Bull, I was like, yeah, let's do this. And then I was like, okay, he left. Maybe I am a Red Bull fan. Actually, I can't because of Max. And I was like, I'm not going to be a Renault fan. So, anyways, is led to perpetual confusion in my world. But at some point, I'll maybe pony up. Got a little
I
Williams
think
gear
I'm
on
happy
today.
with the commitment. I gotta stick to it.
Yeah. All right,
I
let's
want
get
to
into the
I want to
race.
put a pin in the Lando thing, just as a note for later. Like I want to dive into that a little bit more. Nick, you made a point about like if Oscar didn't slide off. Well, he fucking did, and we're early in the season, and like there's a lot of racing left. I think there's a lot. We'll dig into Lando a little bit later, but I want to put a pin in that and talk specifically more about his performance after we get through the race.
And probably the best part of his performance was one of his best starts he's ever gotten in Formula One. So starting P6, climbed up, shot in the gap between two cars, and ended up in P3. Thought that was really impressive. All in all, pretty clean start across the field with a pretty wild opening sequence of corners. Good start for Oscar. Neither of the guys behind were really able to mount a challenge. And then, Trav, I knew you were going to love the Antonelli dive bombs. So
Oh
got a
my
dive
God,
bomb on Signs
he
on lap
nailed
5,
that.
and then another dive bomb on lap 10 on Gasly into turn 1 that were just some tasty boy, like harken back to Daniel Ricciardo, like Danny Rick sends for sure.
Yeah, Antonelli absolutely nailed that dive bomb on signs. Like little bitty lockup, but like totally under control the entire time. I think Lando probably had the move of the race later in the race on a couple of those overtakes on turn one, but that was really fun to watch.
Um, and the other one is turn 4 is the other tasty corner where they kept sending it around the outside. Same place that Max and Lewis actually kind of tussled in their championship year.
That's
But
what I meant,
turn
not turn
turn one
one.
and
Lando around turn
that's what I
four.
thought. Around the outside, that was a tasty move for sure. Same place, funny enough. We were just talking about the Antonelli dive bomb, but Max had a really nice move out around the outside of Carlos in that same spot. Carlos complied, left him a little bit of space, and Max capitalized on it. But it was still a hairy move, and it was not a slam dunk by any means.
So this is something I wanted to ask, just like from a delta between these, let's say the top 5 teams in the bottom. When you get in, like, just this is like opinion, or unless you got real stuff here, but like when you get into some of those lower cars, do you have to be on point more because you have less wiggle room for what the car can comply with? Because like, I was just seeing like Carlos would be defending and he'd get a little out of sorts, and then obviously he'd just like fall apart for like 2 turns, right? And like a couple people would pick him up in like some areas and stuff like that. And so my question is, I guess, if he does that in a top 3 car, does he hold like a guy off, maybe get past once, or do you just think it's just generally like it is what it is, and he just got it kind of out of sorts. And that the way that track's set up is like you're just going to get out of sorts and taken advantage of in the next couple corners.
I think it was where it happened, and also just how tight they were. Like that was just a gaggle of cars that were all within a second. And so, if that happens in a normal race where cars are split by a half second or they're just barely in the DRS range, he doesn't get swamped by two cars in that, sequence of corners. I think he probably got a little bit more leeway in a top car, but with the mistakes that he made, he essentially defended so hard that he was out of position. And that type of shit happens all the time in the F1 game. Like you can tell that a guy's not going to let you pass. You just let him go steamrolling by. I'm going to cross over, and that's essentially what happened. And Sonoda ended up getting him, and then I can't remember who else ended up
I
getting
think it
him.
was Gasly.
Yeah,
Gasly.
he dropped like 3 places in the course of like 2 corners.
Yeah, I think it has a lot to do. Like when you're battling, you're just losing time period, right? Like the side by side air and cars behind you are taking clean lines. So when you get out of sorts, like if you think back last year, like the through goes Hamilton move, he was in that Mercedes that wasn't very good behind a Ferrari and a Red Bull, and he absolutely toasted by those guys that were out of position. So I really think it's just
that
like
was
the art
2
of the
years
battle.
ago too. But
Because
that was the
always
corner
be last year in my heart.
because I was at last year and I was at that corner. That's called Club Corner, and that was actually where my seats were. And I was hoping to see it around the outside. We didn't really get any moves into there, but did get to see Lewis win, which we touched on last year. So Max with a nice move around the outside, but wanted to really call out the Hamilton Sainz battle. They had a good like 6-7 corner battle that was really, really great racing, and just textbook. Like 2 guys that are clean drivers. Like that's unfortunately, like there's a reason why battles with Max don't last 7 corners. So like there's certain drivers where that can happen. They were both giving each other room and just like A+ racing, what I love to see. And like when you're in the cockpit, that's what I personally think is the absolute most fun racing, is when both guys are willing to give room and okay, I'm going to have to take this wide because he's still on my inside. He might not be wheel to wheel, but I'm not just going to close him off. And it ended up, taking Hamilton about 5 or 6 corners extra than I think he thought it was going to take to get past Sainz.
Yeah, for sure. I know we're about to get into pit stops, like first pit stops here, but what did you guys think about race strategy? I was watching with the sound off most of the time. I was at brunch with my family, like watching on the TV, and I saw a couple teams starting on softs, and like that seemed really weird to me. I didn't understand that, and not only that, like it seemed like there was an opportunity for the guys that started on mediums to go long on the mediums and go one stop medium hard. Were they talking about that at all on the broadcast? What was going on there?
They
They,
were.
yeah, they got into it a little bit, and it was. I thought it was surprising. The strategy they're beginning the race, the classic like kind of visual they gave you, whether this was going to be a two stopper no matter what. And with some of the I think was it Ferrari? Did they both go mediums or they go medium soft?
They went medium hard.
Yeah, and so like I think just given what from Bahrain, like track temps, general tire deg, like I would have thought that more people would have been medium just because of what you see there. But yeah, I thought they it's what ultimately got Ferrari where they were kind of later in the race because they were able to extend that stint a little bit longer. But I don't know, Nick,
Yeah.
what's your take?
Well, so pretty much everybody started on the softs. There was like a majority of the field actually started on the softs, and I think it was a tire allocation thing. They knew it was a 2-stop race, and I don't think they had enough mediums to start on the medium and then pit off it if it was an early safety car. So I think it was a lot of tire allocation balancing is why that, like knowing they're having to use an extra set of tires. I think they all thought that the hard was going to be a shit race tire as well, which it kind of did end up being. But they were talking about how like George was able to hold on the softs on that last stint, and he came on the radio, was like, this is pretty audacious, but Lando called it in his cockpit. He was like, I think he's going to be fine on the softs. Like that was a good race tire. So once the cars got light, I think it went from the medium being the best race tire at the beginning of the race when they were heavy, but then at the end, the soft was the best race tire. The hards obviously had the life, but no one really used them to that extent. Like I said, the Ferraris ended on the hards. There was a couple guys that went some long stints on the front on hards, but they weren't really able to make any inroads on them. But the softs were doing well and actually holding on.
Did they
Um,
mention like a one stopper at all? Because I thought when Ferrari was going
I
long that they had a
think
chance.
Charles was pushing. Charles was so Charles got called into the box and he was like, please think about plan delta. Please think about plan delta, which I think was in his mind. He wanted to push for the one stop, but they were seeing the deg, and so they actually went what looked like a weird strategy of medium hard. It ended up working out for him in the grand scheme of things, but yeah, that was a little inter-team battle going on. Charles was really trying to push for a different strategy over the course of a few laps, but still got called into the box. I just don't think that they thought that the hard was going to be such a rough race tire that it was going to be too much of a detriment over the course. Also, only other thing to talk about in the pit stops was the struggles from Red Bull. Normally don't
Oh,
see any struggles from Red
brutal.
Bull, but their lights weren't working. So it was kind of confusing when we watched it live. But both Max and Yuki had the same issue. There's a little light that drops down in front of the driver. And essentially, I think there's somebody that presses a button to turn that green. It's personal for the teams. It's their own system. It happened to Max because he pitted first, and it was funny. The announcers thought, like we're talking about how I think Red Bull thought it was just some finger trouble with whoever was supposed to be pressing that button. But then it happened again with Yuki, and both of them probably ended up losing a couple seconds each with not releasing in a timely manner there.
Yeah, no, the pit stops, I think, for Max, I think generally, like, right, a guy who's been at the front, a guy who has no moderation in the way he races to then have kind of like some of the out of his control woes. Yeah, I'm sure he was frustrated. Obviously, I'm sure he got on the mic a few times, whether or not we caught
Oh,
on the broadcast.
you know he let him hear it.
Yeah, exactly. Whether or not we caught on the broadcast, I'm sure that was some interesting F1 TV tune into Max, catch an earful.
Totally. Um, let's see. So yeah, on that same note, so Charles went long on the first stint, gave him a tire delta, and he actually ended up passing Lando and George in that middle stint of the race. So because of that tire offset, it was something like a 10 or 11 lap difference in tires. So he had a really big delta and was able to climb his way up all the way to P2 or 3 during the middle stint. Then that brings us to kind of the safety car period. So lap 30, Sonoda and Sainz had some contact into turn one. Sonoda went for a dive bomb down the inside, and then Sainz left him the room, but Sonoda actually got a little ass happy on the throttle. So got a little throttle oversteer and he went into the side of Sainz's car. Ended up being pretty tore up. Caused the safety car a couple laps later just due to the debris. We'll touch on it a little bit later. Just kind of some shit camera work and direction this weekend. Like the safety car was the first instance where, you know, shit's happening on track. They never showed the debris. They never showed anybody cleaning it up. There wasn't really great direction from the actual broadcast there.
Yeah, well, that was my thing as a viewer, where you're sitting there, and all of a sudden we see like, looks like a safety car might be coming out. Then all of a sudden it's like the fucking safety cars. I was like, wait a second, what happened? I barely saw any contact.
Everybody was ready for a camera pan to somebody in the wall. And they
Yeah,
didn't
well,
ever do
exactly.
it.
I was waiting for that, or like a dude like hustling across the track, picking up like a big piece of carbon or something crazy, and it just literally was just like the Aston Martin safety car coming out of the pit lane, and I was just like, what is going on here? I have no idea, not a clue what's happening. I was like, how do we get this? Seemed like not necessary. I don't know if they ever covered it later of like how much debris was on the track, but I didn't
Well,
see
they
it.
never really showed it, but they did show
That's what I'm saying.
Sainz's car, and he had a big ass chunk of his side pod missing. So it was a big piece of debris. Also, I saw there was some floor that was pretty exploded. So I think Sainz's stuff exploded down the straight also. So it must have been littered around. I never saw though. They again back to the bad broadcasting. They never showed it.
You could see it on the replay a little bit. I did see that where, like, they kind of struggled to find the moment too, which was kind of weird on the broadcast. Like they showed Sonoda's first move that, like, I think he barely tapped his rear with the front wing and didn't really do anything. But it took him like 3 or 4 replays to really figure out like, oh, this is happening. It was just a weird race for the broadcast overall, like that, and the timing issue that came up where like they didn't have the transponders in the cars working for like 20 laps. Just a really weird thing for the broadcast this weekend.
Yeah, and that was all Russell's car, which like we can touch on that a little bit. But Russell's car was the issue, and then he kept dropping off of the timing board. So Russell would go from like sitting in third or second to then be sitting in 20th. So it led to issues with George having to manually open the DRS, which he accidentally did one time. Ended up slowing down enough and giving up more time, so he got didn't get penalized after the fact. But it was actually also affecting Lando chasing him, because that's how the car behind knows that DRS is available, is that they know that they're within a second of the car in front. So they came on the radio to Lando, was like, hey, and this is right at the very tail end of the race, but like, make sure you're within a second when you press it, because we essentially don't know.
How many technical directors that are on that pit wall are thinking like, huh, if my transponder happens to break, the guys behind me can't use DRS.
Yeah, exactly. Listen, F1 is just rife with the idea of like malfunctions to cheating to strategy. It'll be interesting to see if it comes back around. Yeah, this is quite a bit more damage than I saw the whole time. So
Yeah, that was the big. That was what really caused the safety car. Interesting to see, like from a tech side, you can see that's a multi-stack of different radiators that are actually like getting fed from the air in the front. But it's like, you always think of a car with a radiator straight up, but they're actually like, they're packaging things so differently in there. I thought that, you don't normally get that type of look into the side pod of a car. So safety car restart. Got to talk about the crazy battle between Lando and the Ferraris. That was a fucking tussle. So, Lando got a really good start, but Charles got a bad start. On the restart, you can't pass until you go past the start-finish straight, like the actual finish line. So it made him slow up. He went for it, ended up getting passed by Hamilton. Then Lando sent it just barely around the outside at turn 4, past Hamilton. But then a couple corners later, team hops on the radio, was like, "Hey, you got to give that place back."
Did that
so it was just kind of
did that look like track limits to you guys? Because like I did not see it.
It was really, really marginal, and I think they just didn't want to take the chance. They felt like which they were right. They were like, "We're going to get by him anyways. Let's not risk it."
Yeah.
I agree. I felt like there could have been some pushback done there, but the team probably just took the cautious approach and just bet on the pace.
Yeah. I think what was it? Was it in the Max first championship year that was like kind of the squirrely one where he like kept exceeding track limits at Bahrain? Was that the one?
Yep.
Made,
and
like,
actually, it was
pass?
turn 4. It was turn 4. What I was talking about, where they were kind of got shoved off track, like side by side.
Well, and it kind of looked like honestly in that, just from that year and obviously this year as well, like it looks like it might be a faster line if you send it wide there.
It totally is.
And
100%.
so
in the sim, it is.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like one of those things, and later in the race, obviously, Lando getting the black and white flag, getting warned for exceeding track limits. I think it impacted one of his other battles later in the race, but it's just funny, man. It's like these guys, like being on the edge as much as they are, right? They're just like, not only can I not keep it on the track, but it's actually faster if I don't. And like, I figured out a way to make it happen, but.
Yeah, and that's like, I don't know if you've ever watched any of the like NASCAR races at COTA. They essentially don't have any track limits, and they're like, and it's crazy. So it's like, it's really a series specific thing, how they treat track limits. It'd be too dangerous in Formula One cars to let them do it everywhere, but I love that they let them do it in places like COTA and NASCAR, because it is truly like, find the fastest line. Track's there, you just got to get to the end,
Yeah.
So Lando. And to that point that I made earlier, though, they made the bet on the car and the pace, and he did end up passing Lewis really easily. Chased down Charles, though, and this is at the kind of leading towards the end of the race. Again, just don't like seeing the racecraft cracks that I'm seeing in Lando's game. Took him, made some mistakes, made a lockup, took him 3 or 4 tries to actually get the move done. To be fair, Charles is a top tier driver, and like he was defending very well, but again, flip those shoes. I think Max is getting that done on try 2 at the most, not try 4. Ended up though, what you said, Trav, was the move of the race in your eyes. Really nice send on the brakes around the outside in turn 4.
That was beautiful. And so, okay, I think it's time to get into Lando now because like I watched this part of the race like pretty intensely, and man, I thought he drove okay. Like, yeah, did he make a mistake here and there? Yeah, but like he also like didn't get way squirrely out of position. Yeah, he had to give the spot back, but he sent it on a great overtake. And like I was reading a lot after the race about a lot of like, what's happening with Lando Norris? Like, is he done? It's like, dude, like he just had a tough race, and the Ferrari's a really good car. Like I like keep an eye on this later in the season. They may be a little behind McLaren on pace, but they're best on tire deg for sure right now in the entire field. And like, I think they're a really good car. And he was behind Leclerc and Hamilton, and like those are 2 top tier drivers. And like, yeah, he didn't have the best start, but like I think after he got the 5-second penalty, I think he drove a great race. Like in my mind, like one of the drives of the day was Lando, and it wasn't because he made the best overtakes or whatever. Like he was fully on the limit the entire time, pushing to his, and like didn't make a big mistake. And like sometimes like I think that's really important, and I like to see that even though he didn't like pull off every move that he wanted to, especially with like getting that track limits and having to give it back, like he was on the limit and like pushed it and didn't lose the car. And I thought that was a big sign of maturity from him. I'm not sure a couple of years ago you would see him do that and not lose the car. So I think that Lando's fine.
Fair
Like
point.
I think a lot's being made of his driving, and like I could see as a Lando fan like why you would be nervous because Oscar's really good, but he started 6th. Like he did not have the best qualifying. He kind of missed it on qualifying, but he drove a really good race and finished P2.
Here's what that I think. If you're a commentator, if you're a writer, and you look at the dominance that the Papayas are putting together, you look at the car they have, you look at the 2 drivers where it's like, okay, whoever out-qualifies, whoever can keep the lead, like honestly, unless they really stuff it up or something weird happens, like a weather change or a crash or a safety car kind of like impacts and has that like, let's say, immediate decision-making that can go right or wrong for a race, it's kind of hard to make a story sound interesting. It's like, man, this looks like a Papaya's got this one wrapped up this year. So I do think in classic F1 like fashion, if we can have the Kardashians of racing, which is like F1, like they got to make a story. And I think
Totally.
this
There's
is the
some
one.
manufacturing.
Oh,
some,
dude, they
some
have to. They
storylines.
have to. They have to make it interesting. So at Lando's. Honestly, at Lando's fault, like he's just going to end up eating shit for the rest of the year of like, is Oscar coming for the team? Is Zach Brown, like, is his favorite guy Oscar, right? Is like, is Zach Brown like in love with kangaroos or Mother England? Like, what do we care about? They're nasty. They're both sick. The car's awesome. Super quick. Real quick though, not mentioned yet, George. Guys,
God, dude.
He's been driving well. And
just
I want to
doing
say,
it.
like,
I shit on him. I thought
you
I
guys
was
were
like,
shitting
I
on him
shit on
last
him
year. I
all
was like,
last year, dude.
hey, he's
I did.
outperformed Lewis 2 years in a row,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
then
yeah.
he's and the thing is too is like he is not going up against a nobody like rookie either, and
No,
he's still been beaten
100%.
handily. So
George, like, nearly no, like, a little bit of camera time towards the end as Lando started tracking him down. Kind of just ran like just a solid race. Had a good couple moves in the beginning, but like, yeah, just doing his thing, man. George Russell, the meme that he is, just existing, doing his damn thing. And I wonder if Antonelli can keep putting together races the way they are. If I believe Mercedes has some of the best 2-car strategy under Toto that's happened over the last since I've been a fan. I think McLaren's really struggling to figure out the 2-car strat, like on how to leverage that. Red Bull did okay, but honestly has never really had a 2-car strat. So it's like Mercedes gets it. So if we can get Antonelli up there, we can get George and him like kind of like in a 1-2, a 1-3 spot, you can start seeing more of those overcuts, undercuts. You can start playing silly
So
games.
and so that's the thing that I feel like is the reason why McLaren hasn't been letting it happen is they saw how it devolved in Mercedes and the absolute civil war that was Nico Rosberg versus Lewis Hamilton. Right? So like when you are cuz it doesn't go down to just the drivers, it's the pit crews, it's the strategists, like everybody starts going head to head, and I think it ends up being like what is possibly a long-term detriment to performance. And that's my only hope of why I kind of like the approach that they're taking is like whoever's got it that weekend is going to do it, but we're not going to make any crazy strategy moves on our teammate. Is going to probably leave McLaren as a better team long term, like I said, because it got to a point where Nico just was like, all right, I won the championship against Lewis, I'm out, I'm over it, peace. Like, and that was what it took to kind of keep that team together, was one of the drivers leaving. So all that said, I don't always love it. I wish there was a little bit more gamesmanship between the two McLarens, like when there is some challenges going on. But we know that can lead to things like Spain 2017, where the Mercedes wreck each other out of a 1-2 finish.
So, okay, but I think if you go back just on that topic, right? I think you go back and you look at like the modern Mercedes dominance, not the Nico Rosberg Hamilton thing. I think honestly, McLaren's more in line to having that issue than like if you look at what happened when Hamilton was doing Hamilton things. Like Bottas assumed the role. He was like, I am going to win when I need to win. I will be second, third as much as possible, and we will play this game how I need to play. And I'm happy to do this in support of team. And I honestly think it's why Bottas continues to have a seat in F1. He's like, the dude plays the game and he plays it well, and he's good.
But that's
because
why
he
he's
doesn't have a
never a
seat.
driver's champion, though.
Right,
You know what I mean?
exactly.
That's the difference where like
Right, but
these
there's
two
like
guys are looking at themselves as in I'm
Exactly.
here to win a championship.
Right. And that's what I'm saying. Like, I think you look at the 2-car strat, like we know it's in Piastri's contract. You can't favor Lando over me. Like, I don't think Bottas cared. I think that's why you see that. So now, again, I don't think Antonelli's going to do that. But like, I think if you're going to use a 2-car strat, like the rookie's probably going to eat a little bit more shit compared to George. So it'll be interesting as the year progresses if we see those 2 cars climb, if we or we start to see some of the early Mercedes kind of like, we know how to handle 2 cars. We know how to like test and retest and like strike and attack and defend using these 2 cars that other teams just don't have.
There
used
last
to
week, but we talked about it, and I was frustrated with McLaren's strategy on that front, having 2 cars in the front and pitting them like one after another and not trying to differ those strategies at all. There's so much placating to, hey, we're not favoring either one of you, that like they never even tried to challenge Max for the win last week by trying to take one guy long, one guy short, any variance of the sort.
I will say one thing. Whoever said George beat Lewis 2 years in a row, we're not having that. He beat Lewis beat him by 60 points in 2023. Let's just get that out there right now. Secondly, I think George is the only driver who has not made a big mistake this year. I just looked it up, Nick. Get off Google. George is the only driver that hasn't made a big mistake this year. Like everybody else has made one in qualifying and or the race. George literally has no mistakes up to this point. He's driving his absolute dick off. He's driver of the year for me so far. Super impressed with what he's doing with a rookie that's very, very talented breathing down his neck.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I just wanted a quick little George shout out since I shit on his lawn a lot last year. So
yeah, another little shout out while we're on this too is Pierre Gasly. Having a really great year. He's probably in my mind, like car aside, like driver number 2 for the year. Having a really, really, really solid year behind the wheel, and like he was one of those guys. I know we talked about him a little bit last week, but he was one of those guys that was always on the cusp of like, is this guy a good driver or is he okay? Because he was neck and neck with Ocon this year. He's driving his ass off right now, and it's really fun to watch.
Yeah, ended up what was it? Finishing first points for Alpine all year. which is like big for them. Now all teams are on the board. They were the only one left out. Other call out for the finish is the two Haas's finishing in the points. Ocon being able to recover after destroying a car in Q2, and Ollie Behrman starting 20th to finish 10th.
Unbelievable
Really,
drive.
really great performances by both of those guys. So the other thing I just wanted to talk about was the end, right? So back to the shit broadcast work. They are focused, so laser focused on the Lando versus George battle that they don't even show Oscar crossing the line to finish the race. They show it in a little box on the left side, which is honestly disrespectful to Oscar for like winning the fucking race. Like that should never happen. You should always watch the winner cross the finish line. And then nothing ended up happening with George and Lando, and Verstappen ends up passing Gasly at the line, and they never showed that either. And it's like they need to have someone that knows what the fuck people want to see watching. Like, what are we doing? Like, I understand that was a great battle between George and Lando, but like put that in the small box. Like, we need to watch the guy finish, and then we're watching Oscar's parade lap as the announcer goes, and Max Verstappen makes the move around the out. Like, and it's like there's a disconnect. These guys were sitting here watching the race, and that's why they're able to broadcast it. They're not watching the same camera feed. I was really frustrated, and it was multiple points throughout the race, but then like that double whammy at the end just like was so frustrating.
Can I ask you a question? Like, genuine question. Do you think you would have been more upset if they showed Oscar winning the race by 85 seconds and missed Lando overtaking George, or the other way around, the way it was today?
I think you got to show the respect to the race winner. Like, at the end of the day, like, what are we here to do? We're here to win the race. Like, you got to show that on the broadcast. So like, no matter what, you got to at least, like, even when Max and Lewis were winning by miles, they'd flash them, show them crossing the line, and the sparks would go, and then it would flash right back to the battle. That's what should have happened. It's like but at least give that like respect of like, we're here to watch somebody win a race. Let's actually watch them win the race.
So, okay, last thing I'll say on that is like, I saw an Instagram the other day of when Tiger's last win of the Masters, and they were like calling out camera angles, like trying to make sure they get every angle and all that stuff. That shit looks hard as hell, let alone traveling, hundreds of miles an hour. So I'm honestly just buttering up anyone who wants to put me in a box somewhere. I'm happy to watch a race, with you, help you out a little bit. But it's yeah, it doesn't look easy. But yeah, I agree with you, Nick. Like, it's frustrating as a fan. It makes you want to have like 6 streams, every driver.
It's one of the reasons why I love F1 TV so much, is that when they're shit in the bed, I've already gone back onto the onboard and watched the exact thing that happens and the team radio, and then I'll watch it again 5 minutes later on the broadcast when they finally found out.
Yeah. Anyways, guys, that was a great race, honestly. That thing was like...
Last call out is Yuki. First points from a Red Bull seat, second seat since COTA 2024, which is an absolute insane stat.
Wow.
Good on him for getting some points, and holy shit, I can't believe that's a real stat, especially with Max winning the championship last year. They've had 0 points from their second car since October 2024.
Okay.
That's crazy.
Quick, I need a hot take there. Like, is the car that much different? Is the mismanagement of the second driver that much different? Or they just had that poor... Like, I just look at, like, we talked about it, I think the last time I was on, was like Checo doesn't look that bad now, but like you say that and it's like, was he that good? I don't know. Like, why is that the case?
So I talked about it when you weren't here a week or two ago, but like, Max Verstappen, I think it was last week, Max Verstappen is the definition of a double-edged sword, because he is your biggest like positive part of your team and like your biggest asset in terms of can extract the absolute most out of any car on the grid. But they have now made a Max Verstappen machine that only him can drive. Only he can drive and no one else can drive. And so it's like he can cover up so many things that are actual probably fundamental issues to the concept of the car, that then when you put somebody that isn't quite at that talent level, it shows. So that's what I think. It's like it's that double-edged sword of Max Verstappen. He's so good and he has been performing so well. You're of course going to keep continuing to develop the direction that Max tells us to do, and what is going to help him perform better. But it's gone so far down that route, and we're at the end of these regulations that, we're now at 4 or 5 different guys. Well, really, sorry, 3 guys. And it's not like Yuki's done that bad, but it's not like he's done good either. He hasn't been crushing it. No one else has been able to get anything out of that car other than the off time of Sergio Perez, like in this era of cars. So
Last race thing that I'll say just after the finish. Did you guys catch any of if you haven't, go look at the Haas F1 Instagram. It was like they won the race, won the constructors champ after two cars in the points.
double points finish.
Oh, dude, Komatsu, team principal, just like as a Japanese man who shows very little emotion traditionally, just like oh yeah, that's good. That's good for a team that's gotten kicked in the nuts, I'd say, for long enough. But
since their
inception,
since 2017, they've been kicked in the nuts.
Yeah,
honestly, the only other like joyous moment like that I can remember was Magnussen's pole when the rain was going on and he stuck it out there on the slicks. That was crazy. So couple things I want to call out from the race. Number one, Russell's losing the steering wheel. That was so funny. If for anybody who didn't see it, like his steering wheel literally went out. Like he lost the screen for like 10 to 11 laps. And I thought it was really cool to hear him say, like, they're like, we're about to lose the screen, George. And he's like, as long as we don't lose the wheels, I'm good. And I bet, like, with all the adjusting that those guys do, like, it's probably a fucking breath of fresh air for him to just be, like, at one with the car and driving the car. I bet that was really fun. That was really cool. I also want to give Yuki a shout out. Like, I thought he drove a really nice race. I'm okay with the move on Sergio. Like, he's getting used to the car. Like, I thought it was a racing incident, nothing malicious or anything like that, and kept it under him. Yeah, Carlos, sorry. He kept it under him for the entire race and like looked really solid in a pretty poor car. Ended up catching up to Max, like not all the way, but like there wasn't like an 8-person gap in between the two Red Bulls like there has been. So thought that was pretty great. And then Nico Hulkenberg DQ'd at the end for the skid plate. I was wondering about that. A lot of sparks were flying, and you could see guys down the main straight.
Ferraris too. There was a couple camera shots. I was like, you could really see the Ferraris are still sparking like hell.
You could see down the main straight that the guys were
swerving
over to the middle from being like on that outside line. They were moving over to the middle to avoid some of the bumps in the track. So I figured there might be one. It sucks as Hulkenberg. He's had like quietly a very, very good year, and I hope that he bounces back and keeps doing his thing for some reason. I don't know why he picked now, but looks good.
Yeah. The sparks though. Again, watching it with my dad, and we were just talking about it, it's like one how dusty that start straight was, but yeah, the sparks were crazy. So it is. I was expecting more people to have more like skid plate issues, like DQs at the end, but
there was the one camera shot of the restart after the safety car that was just like crazy. It was literally the whole field and everybody's just throwing sparks. And I think that was the one that we're all thinking of. But it was like, I remember visibly calling that out. I was like, that was crazy looking, and that nobody had any big incidents in any of those like tight moments. Gotta call out the wreck that Grosjean had there back, what was it, 2018? That was gnarly. So, always good to see that when they are racing that fast and that tight, didn't have any actual incidents.
Yeah, for sure. So that leads us into the American racing update from your boy here. If you guys didn't watch this last weekend at Bristol, one of the best Bristol races I've ever seen. It was a lot of green flag running, which at Bristol means a lot of lap traffic. Both lanes were working. Just beautiful stuff in NASCAR this weekend. Like, it was so good. Kyle Larson dominated the Xfinity race and then came in and dominated the main series race. Looked really awesome. Denny was right there too, and had a really good race. But like, if you guys, if anyone listening, if anyone is still listening at this point, is a racing fan and like hasn't watched NASCAR, like go back and watch this weekend's NASCAR race at Bristol. It is just the coolest short track that's out there.
I watched the highlights, Trav. I thought it was a really good race too. It was interesting the way at the beginning, like Gibbs got shuffled like 15 places back just by getting on the wrong line. And then also just like the differing in strategies. And normally I feel like in short track stuff like that, there's more yellows than less. And it, there was a lot of green flag running. I was impressed though with Larson, but I did want to call out. So do you not think that it's a little bit messed up that he can go wreck the up and coming series? Like that's like cool. Max Verstappen went and won the F2 race. Like I just don't get it. Like I understand it from a racing perspective and the cars are not that much different, but Xfinity is supposed to be a feeder series and like give someone else an opportunity there. Like fuck you for going to win both races, dude. Like I understand you put your dick on the table and just like laid it there for everybody to see, but like come on. Like what are you doing?
Yeah, I feel you. I like it. First of all, they're really really different cars. Like they're a lot slidier and they're a lot smaller. So they're just fun to like see those guys get in there. And I think it's like I say really really different cars. Like they're much less different than F1 and F2 are. Like that's a huge deal. But another thing too is a lot of those sponsors want to see the best drivers in every single race, and there's different sponsors for Xfinity and things like that. So it's not everybody you see, but guys that are like real like petrol heads are like Kyle Larson, Christopher Bell. Like you see those guys racing in both series, and that's been that way for a long time. Like Tony Stewart.
I know
used
it
to race
has.
in
I was
Xfinity
about
and
to say that. Tony, I remember seeing Tony Stewart doing that all the time. It's just like coming from the F1 perspective, and if that is, and I understand like at some point it's a commercials, it's its own series. You need to make as much money as you can, but with it being what is supposed to be a feeder series into the Cup Series, it's a little bit like, all right,
Shohei Ohtani is the AAA pitcher of the year or
MVP?
something.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, think about it this
so
way.
like,
Think about it this way. Connor Zilisch he's making his first Cup Series starts in the past few weeks, and like Connor Zilisch blitzed the Xfinity field with those guys in it, and like when you beat in that secondary series, you have some of the top tier drivers in there, and you beat them like you're a superstar.
fair
and you
point.
get a spot. Yeah,
Yeah, you're a dog.
it's a fair point.
You're a dog.
And this sort of stuff doesn't happen very often, where you've got guys that win both races in the same weekend. There'll be times where it's like they'll win a race in Xfinity over the course of the year, but not win both an Xfinity and the Cup Series race. And also just like hats off to him. The dude he's clearly an animal. If you're able to win across two series that are different cars, even though they are very very similar. They are different cars, and being able to perform in both, like that's why Kyle Larson gets talked about in the vein that he does.
yeah.
That was a Max Verstappen, Japan performance, right?
100%. Yeah, he was awesome this weekend, and I love Kyle. I'm glad he won. He deserves it. He had kind of a rough end to last year, and they look to have the car figured out this year. So hope that he's got to get the super speedways figured out. He's got to get that going and start making some wins there. But at a short track, it's him and Denny that are up front constantly, and those guys are fun to watch battle.
Did you want to touch on IndyCar or no?
Not really. It was a really boring race. It was kind of similar to NASCAR. But it was a lot of green flag racing, but Long Beach is super tight and typically has a bunch of safety cars, and it's a pretty interesting strategy race usually. I'm not a big fan of Long Beach. I know that it's been around the IndyCar circuit for a long time, but it's just not that interesting, and it's really tight. The next race, however, is my favorite on the entire IndyCar calendar, other than the Indy 500. The Grand Prix of Alabama at Barber Motorsports Park. It's a very, very hilly, twisty circuit Honestly, kind of similar to Suzuka. It's very small and very tight, but with these cars that don't have power steering and have a lot less grip than the F1 cars do, they slide all over the place. It's a really, really fun to watch. So IndyCar Series always gets off to a slow start with that weird thing that they do at Thermal and how they have like 3 weeks off after the opening race. But it's about to get into full swing here. So shout out to Kyle Kirkwood. He's had a tough kind of a Kyle Larson thing, like did not do very well at the end of the year last year, and won from pole this week. But I think the best is to come for IndyCar starting the next couple weeks.
Totally.
Speaking of the next couple weeks, next week we are in what is my favorite qualifying track of the year at Jeddah. Really, really cool qualifying track, and pending any kind of military activity or hostage situation with the drivers, the oil daddies in Saudi Arabia always give us a pretty good race. So I'm really, really looking forward to it. Under the lights, it's good stuff.
The oil daddies.
The oil daddies.
That's great.
No Diddy. Okay. No,
do we want to make any predictions, boys, leading into Saudi? Because it's this week. We can do it on this pod. What do we got? Any predictions lined up?
I think it's a McLaren one too. I think Lando bounces back. It's a track that fits him really well. A lot of high-speed corners, a lot of straights, really powerful car. I could see Ferrari doing really well, but I don't think tire deg's usually an issue in Jeddah. So I think it's probably going to be a McLaren 1-2 if I had to guess.
You stole my prediction. I was hopefully going to predict a Lando comeback, but I'm actually going to predict a Verstappen comeback. I think this track is going to suit the Red Bulls a lot better than Bahrain. It's a lot closer to Suzuka than it is Bahrain. Not as many big braking zones, a lot of high-speed corners where they seem to perform pretty well. So I don't expect him to go put it on pole, but I think a Max Verstappen podium is pretty realistic.
I'll take that bet. You want to put your money where your mouth is. 20 push-ups if Max gets a podium. I'll do 20 push-ups if Max gets a podium, and you do 20 if he doesn't.
That's fine, because if on the pod it'd be a little bit tough, but
great radio.
Well, yeah, it is great radio.
Heavy breathing in the corner.
I did him, guys.
Gents, if I could place a bet, I think we're gonna see I'm gonna say Oscar 1. I'm going to say Russell 2, and I'm going to say Lando 3. That's how I think the podium finish is going to be. I think we're looking at a 1, 2, 3, McLaren, Mercedes, McLaren. And a fourth finish.
So
fourth
same
finisher,
finishes this week.
Yeah, fourth finisher, though, Antonelli.
Oh, okay. All right. Just
no,
a little
Ferraris
little
in sight.
checkerboard. All right. All right, gents. Well, I thought that was a good episode. A lot more exciting to record this one than the last one, where we just had to talk about how good Max Verstappen was for 30 minutes. But thanks for coming back. Finally, one of our co-hosts has finally joined us.
Happy to be here. Happy to be here. And as we wrap things up, please take a look as Haas just scores points and doesn't win a Constructors' Championship, but is stoked nonetheless.
Cried, do you think?
I don't know if there's any tears shed, but just general stoke was super high. Wait till they get to the pit wall here. Let's go. To
your point, guys, Japanese men don't tend to show a lot of emotion, so that clearly meant a lot.
Stoke was high. Nerves were high, thinking that their drive chain was just going to blow up again or something crazy was to happen, but Haas taking us to the promised land.
Shout out to MoneyGram.
Shout out MoneyGram. Shout out any one of the sponsors who doesn't sponsor this podcast.
That's Ollie Behrman's dad. Wait a second. Go back like 5 seconds. Go back like 5 seconds. Ollie Behrman's dad is literally in one of the pit crew's arms. That is hilarious. Watch this when it pans over.
Here?
No. When it pans over him, that's Ollie Behrman's dad. That's Ollie Behrman's dad, bro. That's hilarious.
Honestly, Ollie had a great drive. Honestly,
I love that.
Yeah, MoneyGram. Shout out MoneyGram. Shout out Ollie. Shout out Ollie's dad.
Shout out Play and Go, whatever that is.
Yeah.
Shout out Rich Energy. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Bring Rich
for the
Energy
real
back.
deep cuts.
Hell yeah.
Alrighty, gents. Well, listeners, thanks for joining us for another episode of the Outlap podcast. Happy to be here. Party on.